Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you had a Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. Here's the reason that we came back early from the property as promised. And instead of me just explaining it, it's best to use visuals, so here we go. So this is an addendum to our 6th visit down. And I'll throw up a picture here so you can have an actual visual representation of it. But the best way to do this is for what you see on the screen here is for me to draw it so I can explain it a little bit better. When the surveyors came out and did the plot map or the site map or the property boundary evaluation, whatever you call it, and they marked the property lines, they didn't have to, but they noted the actual road in retrospect or in conjunction, whatever, with the easement. Now, the easement, if you see my marker here, my mouse, it's supposed to go straight across, and there's trees that line, oak trees and cherry trees, that line the easement here. This easement is 20 feet. The property line goes all the way back here. There's a fence line that runs right around in here. And then the easement includes the property line all the way to the end here. The easement part is 20 feet. So, and that's for people who live beyond, out this way. They come into my property line, and the easement allows them to travel to their property. It makes perfect sense, totally. Now, I don't have a problem with the easement at all, and we're working on keeping it. The problem is where the actual road lines up. And I've done a pretty bad job here of representing it. But what happens is people will come in here, if you see my mouse, and then they'll jog down and then continue on the road as it actually is. And that is 20 feet off the easement onto our property line. So the question becomes not necessarily the property per se, but where are we going to place the fence? Now, my intention is to keep the fence line onto the property line, but off the easement. So what I had done is I had figuring this was the actual easement here, where it says road as actually made off the easement. I went 5 feet further off and then started string lining the fence line. But the problem is when we looked at the survey map that the surveyors gave us, we're actually well off, 25 feet off the easement. So the question is, do I want to give up 20 feet, 25 feet, or do I want to make this road right and put it actually where it's supposed to be? So that's why we stopped. I can't really line out or dig the, auger the post holes for the farm fence unless I get this part right. There's a marker that's supposed to be down here. It's sort of like a two-post marker. There's a marker that shows where the property line is off the easement. So in other words, that's our property. Our property goes across the easement and over here, and I'm responsible for all of this, cleaning it up, maintaining the trees, all that sorts of stuff. And then there's a marking part here that marks the beginning of the easement. So there's a whole post that's supposed to be here marked, and then a post on the boundary of the easement right around in here. The problem is, right around in here where our property begins after the easement. And so our property line would be, here. A fence line should run right across that part of the post. But the problem is because the road came down and over, this marker is completely destroyed. We don't even know where it is. So we need to have not only a marker of where this part is of the property line that marks the easement, but also the marker that marks the end of the easement and where my property line actually begins uninterrupted. So that's why we stopped, and that's why I came back a day early. And, we've called the surveyors. They're going to have to come out and mark it. And my builder will probably be there so we can actually know exactly where we can draw this fence line across the front of our property. In the meantime, what he's going to do is, if you've seen some, I'll throw up a picture, but I'll probably do it while I'm explaining it here. But if there's been so much oak and cherry tree damage here that there's limbs and everything over here. If you look at my property number 4 video, that you can see I started clearing all of this up between the trees all the way back to this fence line that runs across here. This fence line is somebody else's property that's way over in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to grade this all out. Not a few feet off the tree line, but we're going to grade this all out, which will give another 5 to 10 feet of road, so we can grade the new road and put this easement back where it's supposed to be. At least that's the plan, but it has to be confirmed by the surveyors first before we really do anything. But anyway, yeah, this caused some trouble. Over time, people have avoided like the limbs and the sticks that have the tree foliage here, and then people just started piling wood of fallen trees all into this part, and that, I think, what happened, sort of a natural progress, that made people say, well, heck, I'm going to avoid that, and they came down here and created a new road. The problem is that road is 20 feet into our line, and depending on what we want to do with it in the future, I want to make sure I have as much property as possible while also providing people the necessary road that they can have to get to their homes. So that's the dilemma, and that's why we stopped. And there you go. What can you do? It's a troubling and frustrating at times, but you want to get things right. Okay. All was not for loss. In the process, we modified the width of the gate entrance and angled the access line for big rigs to pull into the property if need be. The gate entry will now look something like this. Permitting is still outstanding, of course. Once we get those permits, we'll proceed, and things should start moving along more quickly, and that includes finishing the first half of the barn or garage, more minor clearing of the land, especially space for the garden and the orchard, moving electrical to the property, and then well drilling, setting up a drain field, finding out how much the land perks, that type of thing, and ultimately finishing off the garage, and then the pouring of the foundations, one for the house and one for the garage. As I noted in my video, Why Homestead, nothing about building your own life is easy. There will be setbacks, frustrations, and delays. This is all to be expected. We have become, it seems, too used to the easy life, but is it really all that easy? On the surface, it really does seem like it. We drive cars that increasingly drive themselves. We work behind desks all day. We think all food comes without effort from the grocery store. We live in a land of plenty, but that plenty has seemed to come with a price, and we have especially learned this after the COVID debacle. We cannot touch what this price is, but yet I think we all sense it. Tyler Durden said it best in my last video, and I shared that clip from Fight Club where he decries the plight of men who don't fulfill their nature. We seem to have bought into the lie that we in the most powerful nation on earth can have it all. We have forgotten what it is like to toil for our leisure. Particularly, men understand this sense of loss they feel. Yet, once we toil and succeed, there is no more gratifying sense of accomplishment, more than any desk job can give you. Joel Salatin calls this completing meaningful tasks, where self-worth is created and earned. Yet something has to give, it seems. Will you remain enslaved to the comfort of modern life or venture to carve something out better in your life? This is an individual choice that only you can answer. For me, at this point in my life, it was an easy decision to make. Or rather, I would say it was easy for me to remember. You see, I wasn't always this way. I grew up in a rural setting. We had a large garden and cows. My summer job was changing hand and wheel lines on big ranches. I also took care of racehorses that competed all over the West Coast. I bucked bales and did all the things one does in such life. Cleaned stalls, fed cows. Hunting and fishing was also a part of this life. We would hike down dangerous cliffs to fish high mountain rivers, creeks, and lakes, really, that man had not stepped on in decades. All of this was rugged. We had to hunt and fish to provide our food in the winter months. We had to cut 14 to 15 cord a year to heat our house. And I could not wait to get away from all of it. That's the teenage mind for you. So I left it all behind. I pursued advanced degrees. I met many people we might call a part of our ruling class. I met movie stars and otherwise famous people, all in the pursuit of attaining something greater, something more easy. It was during this time I saw with my own eyes illegals voting in elections to steal it from the rightful winner. That man was Bob Dornan. I knew his family. His loss was a big one that meant Southern California, a Republican stronghold for decades, was at an end. The important thing I learned in all this is that elites are really not all that elite. They really are not different from you and me. There is nothing special about any of them. Even their so-called expertise is not all that expert. They just happen to have good luck to be part of the ruling class. Not necessarily out of merit, but blind ambition perhaps. And of course, as I already said, a good dose of good luck. Power changes people. We should know this about ourselves as well as others, but especially about ourselves. Even those who are well-meaning in the beginning become seduced by the halls of power. Then they think that they really are better than you. This ambition that they have grows into entitlement. There's many such cases I could point to where this has been the case. Yet, I continued to pursue my dream of teaching in higher education. I went to college at an elite conservative school and was taught by brilliant professors who, to this day, I still admire and respect. Nevertheless, I ran into some things that made me question the value of this kind of lifestyle for myself and for our culture, for the United States of America. The most leisured people, even if they are conservative, have a sort of disdain and contempt for the laboring masses. They too become enamored with their expert status and think that they are meritorious. Many of my friends, though not all, were so enamored with this lifestyle that they did everything they could to reach it, including abandoning old friendships for what they considered a larger share of the elite pie. On two separate occasions worthy of remark, and there are many I could remark about, I remember one professor saying, this was after I left graduate school, one professor saying that the laboring classes were a sort of lower being because they had not discovered the secret teachings of the wisest philosophers. Another said flatly, I hate the people who live in the valley below the college, and our mission is to change the culture of those people, to make them in the academic image, so to speak, our academic image, not the image of the one who created them. This is arrogant to say the least, and mind you, I reiterate, these are from conservative professors. All of this grated against me at the time, for I too came from those people that they were criticizing. Those people, you might say, were my people. But I would be reassured that I had risen above them, they would tell me. I never bought that bullshit. I thought that in many ways those people were more wise than most all of people in academics. They had been taught by life, hard experience, frugal living, and a can-do spirit. They could tackle things that elites just couldn't because they had to tackle problems and solve them on their own. Elites really are slaves to the people in that way. They're slaves to the people they hate because they never learn to, say, change a tire on a car or truck.
And I remember thinking, she's obviously crazy, but this is the unhappiest person I've ever met. I kind of can't wait to get out of here, take off with my buddy and go play. This woman is miserable, and that informs all of her views. So that was, 1978, 79. I wake up in 2015, and that's the entire Democratic Party sound like my friend's angry feminist mom, pissed at her husband, who she hates because he cheated on her, but you can kind of understand why, but he's still paying for the house with the pool. And I'm like, those politics, that very specific politics of affluent, unhappy people who have everything but really nothing inside at all, who've reached the terminus, the end stage of consumer society, where you can't distract yourself or medicate yourself enough to avoid the basic tragedy of your life, which is it has no meaning. And rather than solve that by believing in something with inherent value like God, you externalize all your disappointment and hate onto everybody else. Your life has been a total failure. You have no skills. Your kids hate you, but you still have the moral high ground because you've occupied it early and defended it ruthlessly. So people who had everything to be ashamed of diverted attention from their own failures by screaming at you about your moral inferiority, and you bought it. And I bought it, and all of us kind of bought it. It was you can't say this stuff out loud because it's embarrassing, and polite people don't say those things out loud, obvious things. You're idiotic. And no, boys can't become girls. And no, you don't get to run our foreign policy or energy policy. You can't even change the tire on your Volvo. You're useless and dumb.
Through a confluence of events, I eventually left higher ed. Some of those events were my choice, others were not. Suffice to say, conservative, patriotic academics are not welcome in most colleges. There are exceptions to this, but they are far and few between. Nothing drove this point home more than when a friend of mine was driven from academics because he became, gasp, oh my goodness, a Christian. The college, the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, took his pension in the process. Over the next 10 years of litigation, he finally won, but he was so broken from the decade-long defense, sadly, he committed suicide. One must ask a question. If a job is so unsatisfying that you have to depend on it for your livelihood, with all the enemies that exist in it, with all the people that really deep down hate you, is it really worth it? The answer to this depends on your situation, of course. I will add that those who were in what is so-called dirty jobs of education, the HVAC people, electricians, builders, welders, those more or less in the certificate classes, those were the most affable people of the bunch. And most of those people, though, are not necessarily in higher ed, though they are, but they mostly reside at community colleges. The most humble and truly expert person you can find is in these crafts I just mentioned, the doing crafts. They have tangible skills that all men, and I really do believe this, all men should know. And they are rarely spouting opinion when you speak of matters like framing a house. But in the liberal arts, in higher ed, that's all you get is people spouting opinions. But they don't really know how to do things. Those people who taught and even took classes in the certificate classes that I mentioned, they were human. You could have a human conversation with them. You could also learn something real and tangible from them at the same time. And I think that John Rowe, the dirty jobs guy, is totally right about all of this. So I mostly left academics, but not completely. You might say I put into a plan at some point a way to do something like what Victor Davis Hanson and maybe Angelo Codevilla did. Well, Victor Davis Hanson is still doing it. Angelo Codevilla has passed away. Rest in peace. But Hanson and Codevilla both do some sort of farming. Codevilla actually had a vineyard. But they both have to work hard on that land. So they both taught, but they both spent their time laboring. And they used their teaching experience, that skill that they had learned, to fund their homesteading ventures. As one student of Hanson's noted, the most interesting people, professors, are those who don't do professing for a living.
I farmed for 20 years, and then I would get off the tractor and go in and teach 25 miles away, sometimes twice a day.
Wow.
So it was kind of a hectic life.
I kind of like that, though. The best teachers I've ever had, like in high school or whatever, I've always done something else other than teaching, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Professors who know how to live and live a bit more, let's say self-sufficiently, seem more able not to just communicate to people in a manner that ostensibly people understand, but in a way that is grounded in the realities of life in the modern world. People who do have a certain je ne sais quoi that people who cannot do or will not do. People who are less cosmopolitan, in my experience anyway, are more wise than people who are. But there is more. We have to confront also a negative effect or a negative influence. I started with the positive influences, I guess you could say, on me, in order to sort of put a point on that it's not just all bad. And what I'm going to say is really negative, that there are motivations out of fear, motivations out of I don't like this, that are also motivations, but I don't think they can sustain you. Fear is not sustainable as a motivator. So you have to do it for a reason. And everything that I said in the beginning of this little rant, if you want to call it that, it was something more than fear. It was about purpose. Our cities are dirty, to get to the negative effect or the negative influences. They're dirty, they're dangerous. They are run by people who really do not care about us. And if they care at all, they demand that you do what they say and, hey, remain complacent. Know your position. And by the way, continue voting for the same people who do nothing to improve the condition of life. Many such cases in cities. And believe me, it's mostly in cities. As we proceed on this adventure, I hope you will tune in to see our progress, our successes, and our failures. As I've demonstrated in my restoration videos, my more specifically garage videos, that really was the inspiration to start this channel in the first place. I always published my own mistakes. And believe me, I have made a lot of mistakes. So join us along the way, and let's make community in this country great again. And
some people have, some people have not. Some got a little, some got a lot. While people crying 'cause they ain't got a dime. They're standing in a welfare line. Hard times in the land of plenty. Some got it all and the rest. Hard times in the land of plenty. Some got it all and the rest. They ain't got any. Texas said you got to pay more money. Oh, when you already broke, you know that just ain't funny. You got to rob Peter to pay back Paul. You used to stand up straight, but now you got to crawl. Hard times in the land of plenty.
wanted to give you a sense of these rattle boxes when they die. Get a few of these babies off of here. And hold them all together. Well, maybe I don't need to. I'm not sure if you can hear that. That's what these babies are. Rattle boxes.